Locally, Prime Minister, it is my understanding that businessman Leon Samuel, better known as Bigger Biggs, was supposed to receive today from the requisite state authorities whatever legal instruments that he needed to restart his operations.
I keep reading that he requires some legal instrument to restart his operations. I don't know. Look, Kenton, Cabinet acted in (2011), I think it was, on the basis of technical advice given by the relevant state entities with the juridical responsibility for tendering advice to the minister and to the cabinet. It's important to realize this. Everybody who is criticizing, saying they don't see how that advice could have been tendered, well, that is their opinion. That is their opinion, and I respect their opinion. But the advice which I am obliged to follow is advice tendered by the relevant state entities with independent professionals, including the chief engineer, as to the environmental degradation which was taking place up there in Rabuka. And we took a decision. But from the time the decision was taken, the decision was not a decision which ever meant for all time. You read the decision for no mining to go on. Mining would go on if the following things are done. When the planning authorities, the physical planning authorities, the planning board, upon hearing all the information and upon undertakings being given by Bigger Biggs, they said, okay, they will give the approval from a planning standpoint for mining to be done at that site, subject to these conditions. Subject to these conditions, and they referred to the conditions. There was a subsequent explanatory letter about the conditions. Among those explanatory conditions was that, look, you remember that cabinet had taken a decision, so that cabinet will have to reverse that decision. When that came to cabinet, cabinet reversed the decision. That explanatory letter by the officials also said that you would require a quarrying license. And that was held there because there's an entity called the Quarrying Board. I inquired about what is happening. Right from the permanent secretary, they were getting the matter together. And Bigger Biggs asked for a meeting with me. Had a meeting with him. Minister Francis, I invited, came to it. And Minister Francis said this, and with all what you hear is talking, people don't give credit. Minister Francis at the meeting said, which included Bigger Biggs, Marlon Mills Brown, and former Chief Agricultural Officer Mr. Fillmore Isaacs. I don't, oh yes, and Pastor Providence. He was there. I don't know if, I think those are the persons there. And Julian asked this question. He said, but do you really need a quarrying license He said, because if you're not going to blast boulders, well, you wouldn't need the quarrying license, and the quarrying license would involve a whole set of other infrastructure which would create additional difficulties. And he said, no, I'm not going to blast any boulders. And the question is, well, if you meet any there, what will happen? You say, well, in that case, we'll have to give notice to say that something has to be done about this boulder, and so on. That's how the discussion about no mining license came, you know. It is a minister who raised it, you know. Now that is turned about that the ministers were insisting that you get a mining license. Now, obviously, if you're blasting, you will require the quarrying license to mine the quarry. But if you're not doing that, as Julian suggested, well, why go for a quarrying license? And I said, but if a boulder appears, I said, we'll have to have an understanding that if the boulder appears, because if any big boulder appears and you have to do any blasting, you'll have to give information to people around you. Because that becomes something which is incidental rather than being part of the normal work of the mine in which Bigger Bigs intends to do. I hear people talk about all of these things because everybody is preoccupied with, well, not everybody. Those who want to be partisan in a political sense, as though I have something, or the government has something political against Bigger Bigs. I mean, it's just pure rubbish. Absolute, unadulterated rubbish. I am the Prime Minister of the country. I have taken an oath. I have to obey the planning laws. I have an obligation as chairman of the cabinet when the minister comes and reports. The minister is responsible for physical planning. There are reports given. The first one which came along, I saw it. I said, but is this so? About the environmental degradation. I asked Minister Daniel himself, who lives in the area. I said, well, we have to find out from physical planning, the chief technical officer up there, and we have to find out from the chief engineer. Then I got reports from them. I had meetings with them because I was interested in the matter. And I said this before. When the decision was made in 2011 in relation to Bigger Bigs concerning the environmental degradation, that you can only go and mine if the following conditions are fulfilled. Julian Francis said, the minister who is responsible, the ministry, should make the public officials know that we want to see Bigger Bigs continue to do its work. Its work. Not only people are employed, but it's important for the construction industry. I told Bigger Bigs himself that. He even said to me, well, he really had to call Julian and tell him he's sorry because he made some statements in relation to Julian, and you know that is. So I said, I'm telling you, I was chairing the meeting. I was sitting right there. Now, it is for the public to make judgments. If you have equipment at a place and you The state authorities say that you can't mine any further until these conditions are fulfilled. What do you do with your equipment then? Wouldn't you take care of them? Wouldn't you mitigate? I don't want to get involved because in this matter with any controversy or anything like that. I'm just talking plain, simple, common sense language, and to say to you again that I come to this matter with an entire purity of heart.